Hi everyone! Do you want to know how to build a green startup in Germany? Germany, by the way, is known for its strong sustainability goals, but what is the reality for green startups here? And today for this topic I have a very interesting guest. His name is Jerome Goerke. He's a Berlin-based German entrepreneur and he's a founder of a greentech.training company which helps train and connect professionals for the job in a green economy. And he's also co-founder of TANIT, where he helps farmers switch to more natural, chemical-free ways of growing crops. So today will be very interesting. My name is Hanna. I came from Ukraine. On my YouTube channel, BerlinBiz, I try to find out how to make business in Germany. And today we will speak about green startups. Let's get started. Jerome, welcome to BerlinBiz. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I would love to hear about your connection to the city, to Berlin, because Berlin is a case city for startups, and because of that it's interesting to know about your connection to the city. So how did you end up in Berlin?
Well, I come from Australia, so I'd finished university and I'd saved up some cash and I travelled through Africa for a period of time. And I'd actually been to Hamburg when I was 18 and I'd worked in a bar and done different things while I was there, and I'd spent a couple of days in Berlin. I thought, well, once I'd finished my Africa trip I can just have a look and see what Berlin is like, and if I get a job and a place to live like in a week or something like that, then I'll stick around. And that was about 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
What do you love the most about the city?
Well, it's changed. It's like people, people change. So what do I love about it? It's, I suppose it's moved, because I've gotten older as well. Like I've seen a fair bit of change that's happened here. And I think the initial grit and that earthliness that you have when you come to Berlin for the first time, it is kind of engaging, it's charming. So that has shifted a little bit, and that diversity, I guess, is one aspect of that, but it's also this toughness, which was very interesting from the initial phase where I first came here. And the kind of hub, it acts as like a magnet for many different kinds of people, as big cities often do. But this Berlin has a particular essence that it's a little bit hard to define, because it attracts a very interesting group of creatives, often people interested in making art particularly. So from that perspective, it was a good draw card. And yeah, over time, there has been changes that are now kind of in the air on sensors now. But fundamentally, that was the reason. It was more just, let's see what happens. And it turned out to be a permanent city for me.
And do you think that Berlin has everything that people need to start their business or launch a startup? Do you think people have here all kind of possibilities?
I think most cities in the world have what Berlin offers, like most large cities. It's a city of about 3.5 million people, so fundamentally you have that pool of talent that they can offer. You have the interconnection of the city. You have a pretty good transport system, so you can get around quite easily at any time of the day. So it's very convenient for the citizen from that perspective. It is a German city, so you have this ability to have relatively good faith in business partnerships and the development of projects. You can trust pretty much that if someone says they're going to do something, most of the time they do that. So yes, there are, flippant individuals, but fundamentally you have a sense that things actually do function relatively well. It has changed again, but fundamentally I think it has the groundwork and the basis to facilitate business growth and getting things off the ground.
Okay, and what would your advice to people who is thinking to move into Berlin and start their business or startup here?
I'm tempted to say don't.
Don't?
Yeah, I'm tempted. But at the same time, it really does depend on what kind of business you're doing, right? Because you have multiple ways to understand or to make a living. And if it's in the arts, if it's in a space where media is particularly interesting, service industries particularly, there's a little bit of high tech potentially. But if you look at the ecosystem in Germany, it doesn't have the same kind of structures that Bavaria does or Hamburg does, but it has it has the talent pool. It also has this framework. Again, it goes back to that trust concept, that you do have structures that have been in existence for a long time, and they are relatively reliable when you compare them to other countries, for example. So the business structures that are in place but they do kind of work. So you can be relatively confident that whatever you kind of initiate will function, and from the legal perspective and from the principally from the legal perspective, from the tax perspective, these kinds of things that will work.
Do you think people need German knowledge?
Yeah, I think so. For any long-term business relationships, you would certainly want to have that connection, that's intimate connection, because language does function as this social lubricant. So you open up a world that you might not necessarily have beforehand through the language. Initially, for the first couple of years, you have to learn that language. So you have to get to that point where you can communicate with your business partners, for example. In Berlin in particular, of course, yes, English you can get away with, but at the same time, this is kind of your key to more long-term, more meaningful relationships that you have. So it's definitely advisable to learn German if you plan to be here for the long term, because it's the connector. Now, it's what we work with. It's the basis of culture. It's the basis of understanding one another. So we have this ability to do it through language. And so the quicker you can learn that, and yes, it is a complex language, but fundamentally it's there to be used and to be learned. So.
Okay, thank you for your advices. And today we will speak about Green Startup, and I hope you will share with us your valuable experience in this space.
Yeah.
Let's get started.
Okay.
Today we speak about green startups, and you have business in this space. Not only one business, so you are founder of greentech.training company, and also you are co-founder of TANIT, New Earth Solution company. So tell us about what inspired you to make business in these directions, and how you help your clients, your customers. Tell about your business.
I think the original basis for greentech training began during COVID initially, because there was a period of time where a lot of people were caught up at home. People were dying naturally or unnaturally, and fundamentally there was a deep-seated unhappiness within the society at the time. So during that period of time, I was actually quite content. I was quite comfortable with the fact I don't have to go out anymore. I was quite happy at home, and I kind of analyzed the reasons for that, like what would bring about that form of equanimity. And I kind of went back over time and I looked at all the different reasons for this. And one of the core reasons, I think, is that through meditation, for example, you can actually find a relatively clear path for yourself in life. And that is something that has structured my understanding of what is essentially a permanent flux. Everything is constantly changing, and so that we have this ability to navigate through this flux of events. And so by taking that kind of basis, you're flexible. You can actually pivot into any kind of direction that you want to, and you're very calm about that particular approach. You're not intimidated. You can understand that, okay, you're going to wage something. It may make money, it may not. It doesn't matter so much, but fundamentally you have to pursue that particular purpose. So that led to kind of an analysis of what is missing, maybe not conscious, but I was looking at what is missing in the market at the moment, and what could help these kinds of incidents, or what can help prevent or minimize something like COVID from happening again. So this was the fact that as humans, we're pretty good at killing things, right? So if it moves, let's kill it. If it's green, let's cut it down. We kind of use our earth as a sense of a resource without this very old sense of giving back and looking after it and making sure that what we take is replenished, and we always leave the place better than it was before. That is kind of diminished in the Western society, and then particularly everywhere, and through that flow down into other cultures as well, or above into other cultures, wherever it might be. So that is the point, or that was the point for me to say, okay, well, what if we then look at a way to develop a school? So the idea was to look at developing a kind of a training school, an earth school, where we would upskill and place people who are, or what might be called a climate profession. So someone who's looking after the nexus of water, energy and food. And so how can we prepare those people to specifically service those areas of the nexus, and also to understand the interconnections between those areas of the nexus? So that was the core intent for greentech training, and to maybe start in the German market and to look at, okay, so how can we place those individuals in a apparently, let's say, or a society that is apparently short on the specific skills that might be required. So you try to meet the market need for those specific skills, but obviously they're missing. So you have to upskill people to get them ready, because it's a new field, like green technology and all the aspects about sustainability. This is all quite new. So it's not necessarily the case, particularly when it comes to installation and, you know, using your hands and your mind in this new kind of AI or post-AI world. So looking at programs that focus on developing those skill sets, basically hybrid green technicians, so people who can use hands, minds, in the old techne, from the old Aristotelian sense of techne, and to develop that skill set of understanding reason, purpose, and implementation.
Okay, so you tell about your company, greentech training.
Yeah.
Where you connect and train professionals for the job in a green economy. And how big this company is, and how many people works?
We do it in a very flexible way. So essentially, it's highly scalable based on the projects. And the way that it works is that we have a situation where a particular client might come in. And when I say a particular client, it's extremely niche, right? So the way that the public-private model can work in this specific business is to say, we look for stakeholders that are maybe at the regional level, the international level, and potentially also at the local level for the implementation of this. And so it's actually quite complex in the sense that we have to build this ecosystem up. And then once that project is established, that's when people come in to fulfill that particular project. So you might start on a very slim team, 3 people essentially, but that will scale out very quickly to fulfill that particular job that is required. And so then it might go up to 20, or it might go down to 5. And so you're always kind of in this space where you work with the locals from that national market, for example, or you find the people from that national market and you work on a system that they are engaged for that specific period of time as a project manager. So it's essentially a consultancy firm that's me that structures these, let's call them curriculum, gaining the, let's say, the brief. And then from that brief, you work to ensure that the customer is happy over a period of 1 year, for example, or it might be longer.
And who are the customers for this company?
So it's UN. So we work with the IOM. And so we just finished a project in Lebanon for training solar technicians, for example. And the next customer is the German government, essentially.
I mean, if we could tell in general, who are the customer companies?
It can be companies. Yes, it can be companies if they are looking for an academic structure. So if they want an academy designed, I can help them design the academy so that they can actually find the people. So we'll bring the people and we upskill them within the company's specific needs. So yes, a company can be a customer, hypothetical customer. They can also be the end buyer of the products that we then produce. So we would develop a training program with partners like the IOM, with partners like the German government, and we establish a pipeline of talent that allows companies anywhere in the world to actually access the climate professionals. So they are indirectly customers through this process. However, we can specifically design courses just for the companies so that they can directly bring in internationals.
Yeah, and the second company, TANIT, so what you actually do for your clients, and tell about this company too.
TANIT is a pre-revenue startup, so you can't really, technically you can call it a company because we are founded. It is a registered business. However, we're in this phase of pre-revenue, which means that the ideal client is a bulk purchaser. So that means someone who is in the hotel industry or a chain, for example, a chain of supermarkets. Could be resorts, it could be restaurants, for example, but it can also be people who just need produce. For example, the plastics industry could be looking to transition across to organic plastics. And so we help the farmers firstly transition to regenerative agriculture through ecosystem design. And that produce that is grown through a completely synthetic tree process is then sold to bulk buyers downstream who want all the data and they want all the inputs that they get, all the supplies they get to be completely free of synthetics, because that's our future.
And the customers are farmers or?
No, they're more partners. So if you imagine like a pipeline,
who are paying for these solutions?
They're downstream. So the buyers are the bulk buyers. So they are, as I mentioned, those chains, for example, they are looking for produce. So people who buy produce, basically, exotic fruits that we would grow with our partner farmers, and they then purchase that on a bulk volume basis, but they also receive all the corporate social responsibility data that we take from the fields. So they can be data buyers as well, but fundamentally it's produce buyers.
So Germany has a strong reputation for sustainability leadership, but what is the actual experience of launching a green startup here? Could you share with us your own experience, how it is to launch a green startup here in Germany?
I don't know if Germany really makes a difference when it comes to that. I think the country can play a small role, but fundamentally it's the industry. Like what is the product is what trying to achieve. So that challenge will be everywhere in the world. Like you have to find a product or a solution or a service that actually addresses a specific need within the space.
So Germany has no advantages for green startups or has advantages for green startups?
Maybe it helps to define what green means. Like it helps to probably look at it from the perspective that most startups now, I think, are somehow green, right? It has to be. It become the standard to expect that somehow in your business model, there's some kind of circularity, there's some kind of organic components, there's some kind of vision that we are helping regenerate what has been used in the past, replacing fossil fuels. That's how the whole industry is transitioning towards a future, right? So I think 90%, I would guess, are sustainable businesses or green businesses, as you might call them. So from that perspective, I don't necessarily think it's that unusual, right? I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think from looking at the market and seeing what kinds of innovation is coming out from different parts of the world, they all look at addressing some specific synthetic aspect of our society or chemical aspect of our society that they want to replicate with an organic alternative. And that can be anywhere in our entire processes of these ecosystems. So to your question, how difficult it is, I don't think it's any more difficult than any other industry in the past, because it covers so many industries. It really always comes down to, what is the product? What are you trying to sell? How does it address the needs of that customer? Can you do a good product in a good time at a good price? All of these factors would be country independent, product independent, industry. Sometimes it's something that you just have to address from that core basic need of customers. So does Germany offer a greater advantage in that space? Not when it comes to that specific issue. No, I don't think so. But no country would. You just have to address that in some way just by market research. You can do it within Germany, you can do it outside of Germany. So I don't think so, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is how it is. That's just the business itself.
And could we say that these sustainability businesses are wide regulated and complex business in Germany or not? Could we say that?
That green businesses are complex? Maybe you can explain.
Complex and regulated, has a lot of bureaucracy or something like that.
Again, it depends on the actual industry. So for example, food is highly regulated because it's a safety issue. What you take into the body is generally checked at the borders and to see what is coming in. Can it be a harmful? Is it a pathogen? Is it toxic? Whatever, is there disease on it? Can it interfere with the native ecosystems? So it's a lot about ecosystem protection. And that can be a social ecosystem, it can be a technological ecosystem, it can be many different kinds of ecosystems are involved. If we're talking about energy, yes, that's also very highly regulated because again, it's a safety issue. And if you're, connecting something to the mains, then that needs to be done by someone who's got the adequate training specifically. And from that perspective, then you have regulatory, I wouldn't call them hurdles, they are more there to protect both the worker and the citizens involved. So yes, there are, but they're there for good purpose and for good reason, so that we should respect it, and we do, right? That's basically how the society functions in that sense. Further than that, like when it actually comes to the setting up of a business, no, I don't think it's any more complex than any other country. I think there's different models that you can consider in terms of your legal framework. You have the UG, which is like a mini GmbH, as they call it, or simply a limited in the English sense. But you have the GmbH, which is a proprietary limited. So you invest, let's say, 12,500 to get it going with the goal of reaching 25 Stammkapital. That's essentially what they're looking for this GmbH, to protect your customers, for example, for bankruptcy and so forth. But you can also operate on freelancer status, which is the Freiberufler status, which is kind of like a skilled tradesman as its own tax category. So you do have different variable options available to you. And the process of setting it up is generally quite straightforward. It's not necessarily that complex. GmbH maybe, yes, because they read out the whole articles of association. But it's always there somehow to protect and inform the person who's actually going through this process.
And what was your biggest challenges when you started your companies?
Maybe one point I probably should make is that there is a difference between a small business and a starter. And when I was about 29, I started a small business, and that is something where you're not really reinventing the wheel, you're just addressing an existing demand that you can address, but with your particular slant on that. So a restaurant is a good example of that. In my case, it was an agency. We focused on English language services, and we provided that to business customers. And that was an online business, so there was no overhead. It was very streamlined, and we just focused on English as the horizontal, essentially, and we just built verticals on the English language. And that went very well because companies are very quick to understand, okay, so you're specialists in English, can you do this, this, and this? And then we say, well, yes, we could. So the challenge there wasn't so much trying to persuade this new idea, it was more just finding the customers. And that obviously takes a bit of time, so you give yourself maybe 10 months or 6 months, whatever it is, to get some kind of stable income coming through this. So obviously, you have something set aside for that period before to get through that period, and it might take longer, it might take less time depending on your ability to sell, and maybe we'll come to that soon. But fundamentally, once you get those customers, you always try to look after them as much as possible, because they are then your repeat customers. They come back to you because it's an existing product, it's resellable, it's the same kind of service, just with a different set of inputs. So that's one aspect of business to sort of, put aside. And the other aspect is the startup, which is basically, it's not an existing need. You have to generate that need based on, well, that's not true. There is a need, but you kind of have to persuade a little bit more. You have to demonstrate why this particular product is new and it solves these particular product problems for customers. So it could be a solution that's technological, and it's very targeted towards a special group of, let's say, interested stakeholders. And that is slightly different because, again, you still have they still have a product or a problem that they'd like to solve, but your particular product solution is slightly new and slightly different. So they don't just get it straight away. You kind of have to make it very clear very quickly why this solves their problem. And then they realize, that actually does help me fix this and this and this. Great idea. How much? So that's the point that you want to get to when you have the conversations the first time for a starter, which is separate from the whole small business concept.
What are the biggest challenges? Raise investments or?
Well, greentech.training, I'm not interested in investment. It's a business that is a public-private model. So it basically is there to serve the community. And that's what it's there for. It's designed to help companies find talent and to do it through an upskilling process where international organizations might be involved, governments might be involved because they want to upskill their populace. and they, basically pay me to design the courses, to find the stakeholders, to make it work. So that's not an investable concept for most people because it's not highly scalable, and nor do I really want investment for that specific aspect because it's fundamentally a social good. And so to keep it clean, it's like, it is what it is. It's me, they pay me, I find the people, I bring the project together, I make it work, make sure the customer's satisfied. And again, I hope to turn that individual client into a repeat client and then use word of mouth to expand that. So that's one aspect. TANIT is a bit different because at this point we have a problem in our earth, essentially, is that we have a lot of synthetic inputs going into the earth, which depletes the quality of the soil, and that then affects the livelihoods of farmers. The chemicals that they're using at the moment are also impacting their own health. So we know that, we recognize that, but it's very difficult for them to shift from that system of agriculture to a new system which is underdeveloped. So we provide the support for farmers to transition from monocultural patterns, synthetic-based patterns, to completely synthetic-free patterns and regenerative patterns that are looking after them, their families, and their earth, essentially, so that they can grow crops that is healthy, nutritious, without synthetic inputs, all through ecosystem design, through the process of using artificial intelligence to help us understand how nature works with each other, or with itself in terms of repulsion and attraction. We bring that together, and we help that transition happen on the farm with the farmer partners, and then downstream we sell the completely synthetic-free produce to the buyers. So the challenge there is more, how can we get face time with those potential buyers who are bulk buyers? And they're generally closed off. So you have to think, okay, so they're not going to respond to an email. So we have to think in terms of, marketing. We'd have to think in terms of, direct sales. And there the challenges are different because it's a broader audience. It's a broader market that we can serve, much, much broader than green tech, which is extremely niche and extremely specific. But it is fundamentally using the same mechanisms that all businesses have to use, which is, what's the problem? How do I solve that specifically? And how do I make it affordable for the people to make that transition happen, or make that sale, or make that investment for them make sense?
How do you think, in your experience, does Germany really helps green startups? Are there specific special programs or grants for their green startups? Do you know about it?
Not that I'm aware of specifically. I mean, there are environmental grants, but they're not really. They're kind of linked to complex funding models where you can't, as an individual employer or as an individual, access them. So they're designed principally for kind of universities. They're designed for existing businesses, but there's very little in the way of focusing on that kind of typical entrepreneur, the sort of the romantic entrepreneur figure, which is someone who's operating alone, trying to hustle. But there's nothing really for that, no. Which, coming from someone who's studied this ecosystem or tried to work with this system for about 15 years, you can kind of see why. And you understand why that is the case, because you understand, the Germanic approach to this particular issue. We can get into that if you want to, but fundamentally, no, the structures that are available tend to be quite preventive in terms of actually accessing and just getting money to pay your rent and pay your food bills, that kind of stuff. That's very, very hard to get because it's always linked to, you have to bring 50%, or you have to meet a certain age requirement, or you have to suit, you can't have a previous founder knowledge or something, founder experiences. There's all kinds of artificial and kind of unnecessary hurdles that prevents this kind of individual to tap into that specific space. And it's not that different in the VC market either. Like, the VC market will also look at, what is the potential return from this specific idea. And there it's, what kind of traction have you already developed? So no, there's nothing specifically for, that makes it easy to get funding from that perspective. So most of the time you will be bootstrapping, or you have to. There's nothing really in place to support that specific entity or individual through that process, unless you come through the existing systems, like there's a small business, or there is a business that's operating already and they want to have a spin-off, or it's something like exist, for example, where you've graduated from university and you have a year to do this. But fundamentally, no, there's nothing really that is very easy. There are grants that regional entities have, Berlin Startup Grant, things like this, but again, they're coupled with these kinds of mechanisms, essentially, that it makes it very difficult for an international person to come in and access this kind of thing. So no, you kind of need to think in terms of, if you do want to set up something in Germany, you will need to bootstrap it. Unless they radically change their system of funding startups, which is unlikely. Again, if you want, we can go into that, but fundamentally, no, it's something that you will need to take off your own bat and try to facilitate in the best way that you possibly can.
You know, I sent you my questions before our interview, and you told me that some question were for you not easy. And it's interesting for me, which question was the most interesting, or it was a difficult to answer?
It's this kind of question, isn't it? It's like, what needs to change in Germany's startup ecosystem? So I think thanks for bringing me back to that. I think that's the question. And I think partly because it's actually quite a simple fix. And it's quite a simple fix in terms of how Germany could, because I was at an event the other day and they were talking about why can't Germany compete in terms of innovation with America or something like that. And my immediate thought was, why would they want to compete with America when life is very good here, and safe and it's clean? It's like, that's not the comparison that you want to be making, because it's a different kettle of fish. It's like the reason people come to Germany is because of all the things that make Germany great. So it's kind of apples and pears. And one of the aspects about the German culture, one of the reasons it's safe and the reasons that make it a very livable country are the same reasons that affect the inability to innovate. And so that's kind of something that we need to take together. And what could be a very simple mechanism to address this, it's simple on paper, but in reality it's much more complex because it needs multiple decisions to occur, is that when you look at something like what I mentioned beforehand, they have a focus on startups coming through businesses, or they have through universities or something like that, that shifts to and not about me, this is not about me, this is generally the case, that most innovation generally tends to happen through the individual who pushes something forward based on a belief. So that individual is something that is kind of funded more in American Anglo-systems. Like it is an Anglo-Saxon kind of approach, whereas a Germanic is slightly different. So what they could do is just say, okay, so if the principal innovation is coming through individuals, we can probably restructure this to just say, okay, we'll pay your rent, we'll pay your food bill so that you can actually start without any strings attached. Like, just do that. And there are very simple ways of doing that. Like if you have a body of money, and it's like it's $1 million or whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. The structure would be to say, okay, we will give this to one level, only one level. And there's no other decision levels, there's just one basic group of individuals. They could be students that come out of university, they could be anyone who just basically understands how to project managed by one individual. That group is then responsible for inviting or finding 50 entrepreneurs. They could have been, successful, they could have not been successful, it doesn't matter. They give it to them and they say, okay, can you be the assessors of 1 or 4 or 10 or whatever it is, concepts that we would send you. 3 pages maximum or 10 pages as a pitch deck. And for everyone you do, you make it like yes or no. And if all of the 3 that you send that to from this group says, yes, it's a good idea, that money goes through directly to the individual underneath that. And so they have to pay their bills basically. And so the idea behind that is that you very quickly open up the innovation potential for the entire populace. There's no strings. Like, really, do you have a residency permit for Germany? That's it. Yeah, that's it. Like, are you over 18? That's it. Nothing else. And so what's your idea? And so the idea is the only thing that gets assessed based on this entire ecosystem. And that funding happens within 4 weeks. Right? And it's very easy to do. It really is, if you build it like that kind of construct, because that will allow the innovation to then start happening. And
so your idea is to make this way easier for founders.
Yeah.
when they come to Germany and they could get all kind of opportunities to develop their ideas.
Well,
I mean, that's
they've got this new, I can't remember the name, but it's a $12 billion fund. There's lots of entities around this. They haven't actually launched it yet. My fear is it will follow into all the other patterns that we've seen in all of these kinds of systems before. Multi-layer, it gets diluted all the way, and so they end up, the individual founder basically doesn't end up having much at all to actually work with. So that idea has to be scrapped. Like, really, it's just like, you get that. And the people, basically the benefactors say, we don't expect that back. If it comes back, fantastic. They can put like stakeholder, percentages on this if they want to, like how much we get back, but they can if they want, it won't make that much difference. But the funding itself, that happens at the individual level for the founder, you will then open up an entire possibility for innovation to happen. Why? Because it's this 10-page, three-page concept note, 10-page pitch deck, which then gets assessed based on the people who can roughly, from those industries, right? So that's why you need about 50, 100 different individuals to group together, and that's the job of that first layer I told you about. That then allows for this kind of innovation to happen, because you take away all the existential angst of failure, whatever it is that the Germans typically might have, or anyone has, right? So they have this set up in the system that actually allows for the innovation to happen. And then they just say, you've got 6 months to spend it. Get going. And so based on their timeline that they've said, okay, what are you going to spend it on month 2, month 5, whatever it might be, they have to actually hit those targets, and they try to spend it during those targets. And if the idea is strong enough, they will use that money to do the market testing, market penetration. Depending on what the product is, maybe it needs longer for an MVP than tech standard, but it also depends on all the other concepts that come through. And that's the decision-making process of the other entrepreneurs. So with something like that, you then have a turbocharged innovation potential, because you're looking after the people who actually do the innovation. And they can come from other countries. It doesn't matter. They can be German, it doesn't matter. The fundamental fact is, if that money goes to that person, will they be paying it back into the German tax system? Preferably, yeah, because if they're investing through a German system, they probably want that back in some capacity. But even if it's not, like if they're based here and they're not, it's like, that the money must be spent, right? And if they put a condition, you have to spend it in Germany to a German company, so that's fine, that's fair. So that whole process then helps facilitate the economy. It helps facilitate the likelihood of success. 9 out of 10 will still fail. 9 out of 10 will always still fail. But the 10% is actually what you're trying to support through this innovation pool and ecosystem that you then develop. It's very unlikely that would happen because of the Germanic structures that are in place. But if they were to look at it more like that, then I think we'd have a better chance of facilitating this.
how we can describe the situation in the green economy right away in Germany? What could we say? Is it high developed? It needs more attention from people, from society, from government. It has enough professionals. What we would say about this space, green startup space in Germany?
Again, we have a green, which is kind of an umbrella term for many, many different industries. So it's very hard to give what we call a pauschal Antwort. You can't do that, because you really need to drill down into the specific areas of sustainability. It can be energy, it can be food, but even within energy, you have to go down further with wind, solar, hydrogen. And even in those spaces, you go down further between turbine, manufacturing, installation, repair. There's a huge value chains in each of these single strands of green, right? So it's very hard to then say pauschal what is happening in the green market, because you can't. You literally can't, and it's always in a state of flux anyway. Installation is seasonal, both wind and solar. So you have these different aspects that you need to consider. It's like there'll be periods of
How you estimate situation right away? Is it positive, negative for your perspective?
Right now, considering the political situation right now, it's a bit tougher than it was even 10 months ago. But 4 years ago, it's always highly dependent on the mood of the populace. It's also dependent on the international aspects, like what's happening in neighboring countries. In international spec, we've got tariffs now potentially coming from the US. Will that affect the energy supply? Well, there's all these multiple aspects that you can never really give a straight answer. I know you want one because it's nice to have, but you can't. That's the thing. So you can only address it from the holistic perspective that it goes up and down. There are different segments of the economy that work well, and there's specific points within the supply chain that also work well. So, but others don't. Right? Manufacturing in solar has gone down in Europe because of multiple reasons, but installation, not necessarily. It might, it's maybe a little bit at the moment, but fundamentally they are markets, and markets mean that they are always in some kind of flux. And there's the positives and there's the negatives, and the people who are optimistic and those who are negative. So all of those strands come together to prevent like a good or bad answer, because it just simply depends.
Unfortunately, we had not too much time to make our interview, and so many questions I had no possibilities to answer. But anyway,
I think we covered all of them. Actually, I think for most of them, we got most of them.
But anyway, thank you very much for your valuable insights. And to everyone watching this interview, if you like this conversation, don't forget to like this video and subscribe my channel BerlinBiz. And see you in the next video.